afternoon and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Rachel McCormack and I am joined today by Maureen McGonigle, who is the founder and chief executive of Scottish Women in Sport, and also by the writer Sara Sheridan, whose latest book is called Where Are the Women, which was a fantasy walk around the whole of Scotland commemorating women who've done amazing things who, surprisingly enough, have been ignored by history. So thank you very much for joining us today. I would like to know what you think about what's been going on this week with the Tory party.
It's not good, is it? Boris has been Boris and Hunter in the finals of the leadership campaign, to be voted in by a few thousand Tory members,
who are an average age of about 50.
105. And are pretty much all white. I mean, this is the way it worked. It's the way it worked with Gordon Brown, actually. When Gordon Brown came in, he inherited, if you like, the prime ministership. So, and in fact, Boris Johnson wrote a cracking article at the time about how unfair it was, which is now coming back to haunt him. So, fun and games with the Casti-Uppies. The big book of Casti-Uppies with Boris, I feel, is a long tome.
But do you think, can anything land on him, Maureen? Because it just seems that no matter what happens to Boris, you kind of get the impression that he could, he could like strip on live television and masturbate and it still wouldn't matter. He'd still become Prime Minister.
I just think it's amazing. I actually think it's amazing the amount of hours that the television are giving over to this, because, people in the street are not going to have an opinion. They're not going to have a chance to change this. So, we're listening to this and it's really for the small minority of people. Now, I don't think anything he does will make a difference. I don't understand it because I don't think it's right. But he seems to get away with an awful lot. It's like a naughty schoolboy, a tap on the shoulder, you're a naughty boy. So, just don't do that again.
Did you read Jeremy Vine's story? He told a story the other week about Boris.
Coming in and deliberately messing up this public speaking gig that he had.
Do you want to explain what the story is?
So Jeremy Vine, who sounded like he'd put quite a lot of work into figuring out how to do this, how to speak at this event, was there, and Boris was coming along to introduce the awards ceremony. I don't know what awards ceremony it was.
It was like an Omni security one. It was just a nonsense.
Yeah, so it was massive. And Boris turned up, 5 minutes before, sat down, wrote a couple of things on a piece of paper, and then stood up and basically bumbled his way through the speech saying, "Where am I? What am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. Ha ha ha, this is hilarious. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful night." And everybody loved him. And Jeremy Vine afterwards said, "Oh my God, he was just amazing. Like, he had this great talent for public speaking and everyone in the room loved him, even though he didn't know what he was doing." Lucky break for Boris. And then sometime later, Jeremy Vine was at another event and Boris turned up and did exactly the same thing with exactly the same speech, word for word. And this was just how he won over the room, was with this sort of bumbling persona, which is quite interesting because looking at it, stepping back from that a wee bit, that would, I think when Boris does this bumbling, which he seems to do all the time, he expresses what appears to be vulnerability. And of course, people warm towards vulnerability. If you mess up on stage slightly and then recover yourself and laugh at yourself, people really like that.
It's a very British trait. Do you ever remember the time when Richard and Judy had to go and accept an award and Judy's dress was like wide open?
The nice white bra.
And it was like a really smart black dress, and it was this kind of maternity white bra, and somebody ended up standing in front of her, but everybody after that decided they absolutely loved Judy. She could do no wrong after that.
Yeah, because the minute you're vulnerable, people love you. So Boris has got, and Trump, Trump, it's the same thing with the Trump thing, slightly different emphasis because it's culturally different in America, but that thing about, I'm just going to say what I want to say, I'm just going to be myself, isn't that wonderful?
That in itself is a worry,
because
it is all an act, and it started, as you say, from bumbling, but it's now moved in. I think he's trying to appeal to more mass people, so he's changing it slightly. His hair's not just as disarranged, but I don't know, I just don't get why people would want to have that kind of individual at the helm of anything.
I think it's a very English thing that I think Scottish people find really hard to understand, which I think is one of the reasons why the Scottish Tories are terrified of a Boris Prime Minister. They're trying to manage it, but they know it's going to be an absolute disaster for Scotland having Boris as a Prime Minister. But also, Isn't it that interesting, or that we don't? I just think we don't understand him because we're not English. I think he's a type of English character that the English like. If you look at how popular Hugh Grant was, it's kind of that sort of bumbling oaf, and when Hugh Grant was like this major sex symbol for playing these characters where he basically bumbled about the place and kind of he was quite posh, and he was kind of a bit reticent and bumbled.
I think it just says something with the Scottish character. We're much more thrown. We see through people a lot easier, I think, than perhaps maybe other nations do. And I don't think we accept idiots.
I think who gets in, it's a moot point. They all voted exactly the same. If you look at their voting records and all the sort of key issues around Brexit and around lots of other stuff that's going on around austerity, all of the candidates voted exactly the same. So So it's a personality choice.
So
it's not
why
political
do you
choice.
think that, for example, Rory Stewart was much more popular in Scotland than Boris?
Because he went out and talked to people and answered questions and listened, which Boris isn't really great at.
I think also, for me, I didn't really know him that well. And again, you're looking, you put them all together. But I think he kind of answered quite honestly. I did see an interview after he had been doing one of the talks, and said it wasn't really my best. I don't think I flourish in that sort of
glorious
environment.
Vulnerability again. There you
yes,
go. Once the minute you do that,
it could be that as well. But I just thought there was perhaps a bit of honesty there. I mean, you can't have two of them playing the same game, or can you?
I wonder if that was not the reason that that Boris's team wanted Rory out kind of as soon as possible.
Yeah. I felt Boris came to near where I live in Stockbridge in Edinburgh one day. He was up doing one of his chats, and he'd gone to the university and he was coming down to Stockbridge, and I thought, I could just go down and have a wee remonstrate with Rory. And I didn't actually go out because there was various other things going on. I was like, I'm too late to catch Rory for the remonstrate. But I would never go down to remonstrate with Boris. So I think that's what it is. It's an approachability. It's you feel like he might get your point, Rory. He comes over as more reasonable.
And you don't think Boris would?
No, I think Boris would listen to you politely. I mean, the reality is probably Rory would listen to you politely and go off and do what he was going to do anyway. But the impression is that Rory would maybe listen to you, or that you would have a say with Rory, whereas I think Boris, you wouldn't. I would never go and remonstrate with Boris. I love a remonstrate.
What I would like to know is, what do you think this will do, even just for sort of the independence cause in Scotland? There is an element where the best thing that could happen to independence in Scotland is to have someone like Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. But also, I think the worst thing for the country is to have somebody like Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. So it's that catch-22.
I don't think any of this was going to be good for the Union, was it? Brexit. Generally, it just totally marked up the fact that we have this massive democratic deficit. And so, none of it was going to be good. But I think Boris's, the contrast between Boris and his inability to talk to the subject and to talk kind of honestly to the subject is going to play into the hand of our politicians who, some of our senior politicians are extremely competent, absolutely happy to answer questions, really happy to answer difficult questions. And so, I suppose it's going to turn people around. I know I have a 50-50 acquaintance. I know a lot of people don't know anyone who's yes or anyone who's no. There's people that live in that kind of bubble. And in the last month, I would say I have 3 people I know, not only who voted no, but who vocally tried to talk to people who were voting yes. A lot of no voters didn't get involved, didn't want to sully their hands with the independence debate. And literally in the last month, I know personally of 3 people who were no campaigners effectively, who are saying, we're not having this, we're coming over to yes. And in 2 cases, they've resigned their party membership of the members that they were parties. So to me, that's extraordinary. And one of them is a person I thought would never ever do that.
And what is it they've seen over the past few years to make them change their mind?
I think that they've folded it, if you like, over the last few years. I think it's this, they didn't know what the outcome of Brexit was going to be, and they kept saying, oh, we don't know, and they're looking at Boris thinking, actually, we're beginning to know. We're beginning to feel that we're, real fear of a no deal, real fear of really poor government from Westminster, not just the normal bad government that we've been getting, or poor representation, but the way that Boris talks about Scotland.
But to be honest, the way he does about everything.
Yeah.
I remember when he was first the Foreign Secretary, he went, one of the really big things about the whisky industry in Scotland is India, and the EU had been negotiating with India for about 4 years about national tariffs, because I think India has you can have interstate alcohol tariffs, but India has a really big alcohol tariff on nationally, so it does mean like a bottle of Johnny Walker can cost about £100.
Right.
And if they took, basically what everybody said, if they took the national tariff down in India, there is not enough whiskey in Scotland for the Indian market. We could all just give up all of our jobs and just make whiskey. And the thing was, as soon as the Brexit vote happened, that all just went down the tube. So one of the things that Boris did, the first thing he did was he went over to India, he spoke to them in Irish Gaelic, didn't speak, and he used some words in the wrong language, and then went on about the alcohol tariff, and they said to him, well, unless you change immigration, you're not getting a deal, which was also then why when he went to the Sikh temple and insulted them by talking about alcohol, it was all about the Indian alcohol tariff. And Boris decided in a temple with brown people, then they've obviously got to be Indians, and they must be able to influence Indian trade deals because they're brown.
Yeah, it's just
even
awful.
if they've been
the
they might have been here for 4 generations, but who cares?
It's like having Prince Philip back, but in politics. That point we used to watch Prince Philip walk into frame sometimes at an event, think, oh, what's he going to say? It's getting like that with Boris.
But the problem is, you didn't choose Prince Philip. You can choose not to have Boris, and this is the major problem, isn't it? I do think Scotland has a totally different viewpoint on where Boris is concerned, but it does worry me that could be where we end up, looking very likely.
I suppose also you looked at our international standing of. One of the arguments that I thought quite a coherent argument for remaining within the union was about our international standing and how we were respected. We did punch above our weight. What would we do as Scotland on our own? We would just kind of be the tartan place with whiskey. But that has gone since Brexit. It's just I don't know about your experience of just even talking to people from abroad, or just our international standing. We're in the mud. We're just a laughing stock. It's like Spanish people say to me, it's really nice not to be the most embarrassing government in Europe, and I'm like, oh my god, because Spanish governance is horrific. You kind of people put up with Spanish governments because Spain's a nice place to live in, but they're like, you're worse than us. That's thinking, no, we're actually, yes, we probably are.
I think that's the problem in terms of the visibility now, in terms of politics. It doesn't just stay within the country; it goes throughout the world. And I can't begin to think what the perception of people outside the UK have of what's going on.
And that actually, when going back to your original question about what is this doing for independence, I think it's actually making other countries look at the UK and say, we understand, we get it.
If you look at now the amount of people that Nicola Sturgeon is meeting in Europe that she wasn't meeting in Europe, 2 years ago, because nobody would want to antagonise Westminster. Now they don't care, and I just think it is really interesting to see. Sort of in 2014, I think from what I could see, the sort of general international thing was these people are mad to want to leave this union, and now the difference is really palpable just internationally. Nicola Sturgeon goes somewhere and it's crowds are stowed out to talk to her. A friend of mine who's Brazilian. He's sort of Brazilian Scottish, and he said he was in the customs in Porto Alegre, and this guy was like, oh, so you're from England? I went, no, I'm from Scotland. Oh, you're that lady, your leader's that lady with the red dress. It's just like, this is like a customs official in the south of Brazil, and he knows about Scotland. And he said, they just everything, even like the Salmon Court case, he said it appeared in a newspaper in southern Brazil, because it's like that, and what concerns me is I don't think Scottish people are quite aware of internationally how much damage this has done to the UK brand, and aren't aware how much good it has done for the Scottish brand. It's like they don't know.
And it's really easy to find out. You go online. I try to read lots of different newspapers because I'm just always interested in differing viewpoints, and reading the Irish Times and some of the English language German newspapers and things. It's not difficult to find that information actually, because they're writing some really critical, full-on critical articles.
Oh no, I think
extraordinary.
I think Britain's totally in cultural and social kind of decline, and the economic decline hasn't started. But I think we're massively, our international standing has gone. Nobody looks to us for anything sensible anymore. which
Thank you, Boris.
Which, I was going to say, which goes back to our first debate, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the difference in terms of the statesman's-like way that Nicola Sturgeon holds herself, and you look at Boris. There's no comparison. You know, you've got a comfort there. You know, you might not agree with the politics, but you agree that the person is representing the country and is, you know, looking like a leader, acting like a leader, being a leader. I don't know what we're going to have in terms of UK.
We've kind of basically got Bertie Wooster on acid. I mean, you know, because you don't know if you've
There's
ever
a film there, isn't there?
Yeah.
absolutely. Because
We'll all laugh about it afterwards.
Carry on, Boris.
But the problem is, it's, you know, he's there's also, like, I suppose when you actually look at it like that as well, you know, when the UN are saying 100,000 people have died needlessly because of the welfare reforms that actually haven't saved any money, never mind anything else. You're kind of going, actually, although this is all quite fun, it's people are going to die because he's Prime Minister.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name of the woman who is in jail. Who Boris said that it was not his fault that she didn't get out.
Is it the journalist, yeah.
Who is now on hunger strike. She and her husband.
Oh yes, the Iranian woman.
Who's now gone on hunger strike. She and her husband have gone on hunger strike.
It's Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe.
Oh, you're good.
No, I've got an earpiece.
Well done, you.
No, I've somebody
have one of them,
I
please.
have a voice in my head that actually is in another room. It's not in my head.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know, this poor woman who allegedly could have been got out of prison, and that it was possible to do the kind of diplomacy that Britain has always in the past prided itself on being really good at diplomatic intervention on behalf of its citizens abroad. You know, she's in prison still, and that's really horrific. And Amnesty have launched for some time now, have been running a campaign.
Because he just said as a slip of the tongue, oh, she was a journalist, rather than actually saying what his briefing was. But then, you know, he went to Myanmar and was trying to read out Kipling poems about colonialism.
It's awful everywhere, but that's a woman who's in jail.
Yes.
And you know, so there is this very serious side to it, and you know, it's easy to laugh about Boris.
Yes, and that shouldn't be the case.
Do you wonder if that's maybe? I'm wondering about this. Do you wonder if that's the problem, that, you know, Have I Got News for You and those kind of satirical news programs have, like, taken over everything, so therefore everything has become about having a laugh, and people are forgetting that there are times when you don't want someone that's funny.
We should say we're against Boris and the causes of Boris. That's what we should be doing.
But what are the causes of him?
I think in terms of your last question, I think people can separate. I mean, you've got to credit the public with having some sort of.
Well, they voted for a boat to be called Boaty McBoatface for a serious scientific research. So
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
you're liking this.
Hands down.
You know, I think people can separate. I just don't understand why they're not separating the individual now. You know, they can separate the programmes, as you're talking about Have I Got News for You. I'm at a loss to understand it, to be honest.
I think there's a place for satire. Do you know what I mean? We've had decades and decades of amazing satire, and actually change is sometimes fired by satire. Political change can be fired by satire. So I don't think it is down to Have I Got News for You. I think it's down to people losing hope and Boris giving them something to feel cheerful about. Maybe, I don't know.
I mean, I realise it's actually really hard to talk in Scotland about Boris's appeal. That in a way that in England people would have a better idea.
I think what we've missed actually is that, you know, the lineup, there wasn't that much to choose from. You know, it's not as if there was one outstanding character that had, you know, the leadership, the honesty, the integrity, and Boris, in terms of his buffoonery, was overtaking. There was nothing much between all of the candidates, really, in terms of who you would choose, and I think that makes it difficult. There's no one outstanding.
It's a really good point. I mean, when I grew up in a house where we all disagreed politically, all my uncles voted and aunts voted for different political parties. We were actually quite a political debatey household. We weren't a household that all agreed with each other. There was always political folk through the house, because one of my uncles in particular was very involved in politics, so I got to meet a lot of these people. And, you know, Malcolm Rifkin coming through, or Heseltine coming through. I mean, I'm not a Tory, but there are people in my family who are. And they were interesting, intelligent, thoughtful people, you know, and we just don't seem to be having that now. We seem to be, and maybe it's not the comedy, maybe it's the rise of social media, which makes, you know, brings personality into your daily timeline. Maybe it's that, I don't know, but we don't seem to have that kind of old-fashioned quality of thinking, and actually that's something that Jim Sillars is often saying. That's Jim Sillars' argument. You quite often hear him talking at events about the lack of thorough political thinking.
And where do you think that happened? How that happened? It does seem that it's just all about the kind of the debate and the pretense. It's not actually about policies or people's lives. And it is the I know people would always say that politics was showbiz for ugly people, but you're kind of just thinking it's not even it's like crap showbiz. It's like vaudeville for it's not even like a decent West End show. It's some kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like pantomime in Margate, or I don't know, pantomime in Saltcoats, and it's not even pantomime in the Kings anymore. It's so bad.
Oh yes, it is. I kind of fell in there.
I quite like pantomime at the Kings.
I think it's disappointing all round. There's no one there at the moment, I think, that's basically putting any effort in. The whole topic's Brexit, and the country's not all about Brexit. I know it's important. Something's going to happen. We shouldn't be at this stage now. We should have been at that stage years ago. But we have to think that there are bigger issues as well, and the whole debate's still around that. And so they can focus on that. And I just don't get the comfortable feeling that we're going to be taken in the right direction by any of them.
And you think a no deal is? A no deal's beginning to look more likely. What do you think about that?
Oh God, no deal. Well, it's not good, is it? It's going to be fairly traumatic.
And I think the figure stands for themselves in Scotland, what the majority of people in Scotland wanted. I don't think they've changed their minds. In fact, I think there'll be more that are concerned about, where we're going to go, that perhaps did vote for no. So it's going to be interesting going forward.
But just with no deal on Brexit, the kind of the immediate effect of on food banks on your shopping, because that's I've already started stockpiling.
I have, my mother's 90 plus and having difficulty getting some tablets. My daughter has a health condition as well, and again there's difficulty getting tablets. And I'm wondering in my head, is this because they thought that the deal was going through it and they stopped? I have no idea. I think it's the unknown that's perhaps quite scary, and getting these little bits and pieces of what could happen is frightening people as well. So we need to get to where we want to be, whether it be good, bad or indifferent. We need to get there so we understand what the issues are and start to deal with them.
But what about this idea that, when you hear people talking about a no deal Brexit and it's fine, we survived the war and things like that, and we were all right and we'll survive this. What do you think of the people that say that?
Well, we want to do better than survive, and we can do better than survive. Going through something difficult is not always a good thing.
And also, what is it they think they'll get at the end of it?
Yeah.
I think it's that the problem is the impact is not going to be something that will be felt year 1, year 2. The impact is long term, and to change that. So, there will be people with that. There's always the optimists wherever you go, but I think we have to be realistic in this particular issue and make sure that we are prepared.
It's a huge amount of demand.
Yes.
There's a huge amount of disaster planning going on in the Scottish Government at the moment.
And have you done any disaster planning yourself?
I have some petrol. I went and got some petrol because my daughter doesn't live in Edinburgh. I thought, if I have to go and get her, will I be able to get petrol? So I've got some extra petrol in the garage and some rice.
That's a good plan.
Yeah.
Do you have you?
The things that I like are gin, so I was stockpiling gin.
That's an investment.
To be fair, we'll be fine with gin and whiskey because we won't be able to export it.
So my advice to the nation is buy as much gin and whiskey as you can.
We've probably got enough gin, whiskey and lamb
and
to keep us going.
And it won't feel just as bad as long as we've got that in, because we're going to have a couple of halves. I think it's not as bad.
I have genuinely stockpiled oil and just cooking oil and tins of tomatoes and various tins of veg and fruit, because what we won't get is fruit and veg.
Yeah. I think it's quite interesting because I'm sure we could do some kind of personality analysis on what we've all stockpiled. What is closest to your heart?
You have to go and pick up your daughter. I'm a food writer. Because gin and whiskey are the only two things I'm not worried about. I'm worried about everything else in my life.
I still like to stockpile them.
You'll go through them anyway. Yes, it's going to be grand. You can have a party.
Now, I also want to know, we were talking about Boris has obviously been in the news over the weekend again because of this domestic. And to me, everybody will know the story that basically somebody, I think a neighbour two flats along, phoned the police because there was this massive altercation, and he knocked on the door and nobody answered. and it turned out to be fine. But then yesterday, and also Carrie Simmons, his partner was like playing it all down, saying it wasn't that big a deal. Somebody has the tape. The neighbour 3 doors along recorded what the argument was, that he could hear it in his house, which is
pretty big,
quite a big thing, and gave it to the Guardian. And the Guardian haven't released the tape, but Boris then refused to answer questions on it yesterday. And really interesting thing they were saying in the hustings was when Ian Dale was interviewing him, and he was refusing to answer questions on it, the audience were booing Ian Dale. They weren't booing Boris for not answering.
Yeah, I mean, Alison Pearson, who's a Telegraph columnist, was online, I think yesterday, saying that we should be shaming these neighbours who have tried to intervene. I think we should line up some women to speak to Alison Pearson, whose neighbours reported what was going on and therefore really saved their lives. It's okay if you hear somebody that is saying things like, allegedly Boris's girlfriend was saying, "Get off me," you need to intervene. And that's a safety issue for women. So yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? It's almost like that Trumpian thing where you hear Trump's, had assaulted, 27 women allegedly, and has, sexually assaulted these women, and America doesn't seem to care.
Oh, I mean, there was a thing in The Cut, which is like the New York Times sort of weekend magazine, and it was a female writer a woman whose name I can't remember, but she had written this really long article about the worst men that she'd ever known, and she talked about being raped by him in a department store, and she was 52, and she said, this might not have anything to do with this, but I've never had sex again, and she just said, he was the most kind of loathsome person that she'd met, and it's nothing's going to happen with that. It's just, I mean, is it a backlash against? Do you think it is some women, and obviously mostly men, but some women thinking women are getting too uppity, or are they just thinking that sexual assault isn't important? What is it that you think's going on?
Well, I'm a bit confused, to be honest with you. I think we've created an environment, or hopefully we've created an environment where women feel comfortable in coming forwards when any type of violence against them, because that's not always been the case. Unfortunately, in this case, the woman herself hasn't come forward, so that makes it a bit more difficult. But then we go back to it in terms of leadership, in terms of understanding what your position is, in terms of realising nowadays, you have to be silly nowadays if you think you can get away with things, and the press and the media and social media are not going to get hold of it. So I just think it's another foolish thing by Boris. And that sounds as if I'm underplaying it, but I don't mean to say that. But it's another example of why people should think twice.
But also, it seems that it doesn't matter. I mean, that's the thing. If you look at, there's been, I mean, what do you say to somebody now? It's like, if you report sexual assault or you report domestic violence, they're still going to be the president or the prime minister.
Yes.
I think the Tory argument around this yesterday online very much seemed to be, well, it's his personal life and we shouldn't be intervening in his personal life. And of course there's an ethical question there about where that line is. I mean,
and where do you think the line is?
Well, I think if someone's shouting "get off me," a woman is shouting "get off me" in a private property in the middle of the night, and is, it sounds like she's being assaulted, then that's over the line. Who Boris sleeps with, I'm a lot less interested. Personally, that doesn't, I just don't consider that who anyone else sleeps with really my business. 2 consenting adults, away you go. But assault, yeah, that's way over the line for me.
I mean, there was also this big story about him having various children that needs to, and then they have needed to go to court to get him to recognise the fact that he has these children.
That's very telling.
I don't think he's alone in that type of story in terms of politicians or men in positions of power. That is, a known fact. So it's finding the balance, isn't it? It's finding the balance in terms of your personal life and your public life. How much of that is your actual character? Is this act, in terms of his personal life, is it impinging on his ability to make decisions for the country in his
I mean, also kind
life?
of, what does it say about his character? The fact, that he has had children had to go to court for him to recognise him, as opposed to looking after them.
But again, if we look back in history, he's not alone. There have probably been many cases and where that's happened. Just so happened that this is now coming out during the lifetime of the individual, while he's here, while he's going for a position of power. It just shows you the power of the media, I think, nowadays. You can't hide anything.
So I do remember, like, I think about when Mitterrand was, he wasn't the president of France anymore, and he was dying, and it turned out he had this other child. And I think apparently the big shock was there's an assumption that the president of France does have a lover, but the assumption is normally it's a political journalist. Yes. What they were really surprised at was that she was an actress. That was like that's weird. Why is she an actress? And it's really, I think it's really interesting to see that sort of male figure and how they kind of become this the kind of the ideal representation of something.
I think it's all about power as well. You know, a lot of women are attracted to power and get into a situation where they're happy to agree to whatever conditions to be still in this environment, this relationship, because it's person's power.
And do you think it's to do with women having a lack of power, so they can only see that they can get power through powerful men?
Well, they've said that about Clinton, didn't they, and Hillary Clinton? So I would agree with that.
What did they say about Hillary?
Well, I found it fascinating watching that documentary, and they said that, you know, Hillary Clinton stood by her man through thick and thin, and it was because she was feeding him. At that point, it was not coming into anybody's head that a woman could be President of the United States, and that she got her power through being with him. So, yeah.
And do you think that's still the same now?
I would hope in Britain, the UK, that it's not. I would hope that we can support more women. Let's be honest, you know, there's a lot of, in every walk of life, we're trying to empower women to be there. Politics have had women there and will continue to have more women there, but I think there's a case that we still have to empower a lot of young women to stand on their own 2 feet and to fight their own battles, knowing that they're entitled to do so.
So moving on from one powerful toxic man to another powerful toxic man, the US might soon be at war with Iran.
So well, he called it off, didn't he? He said he wasn't going to, there was going to be too much loss of life, and so he stopped this bomb that was being sent, Trump.
So why do you think he did that?
I've absolutely no idea, because Trump is just such a mystery. Like, ask me why Trump did anything, I don't know. There's no kind of logic, because you'd think that, I mean, Trump is driven by never feeling shame. Like, and for men, shame is gendered, and so for men, the most shameful thing is appearing weak. This actually might be useful in getting a referendum okay out of Boris, if Boris feels that he needs to look strong and fight the referendum. However, going back to Trump, so you would have thought that he would want to militarise, but then maybe it's just a very, very cold threat. Like, I've called off this, but we've still got the bomb. So,
do you also not think it might be the Russians telling them not to?
Totally could be. I mean, there's definitely a certain amount of Russian influence going on in the White House, and several reports about that knocking about in America at the moment. Which,
but I think also Putin officially kind of said in a speech.
Oh, did he?
It wasn't.
Don't do that.
Phoning up Donald and going, "Hi, Donald, don't do that." You know, you work for me, which, you know, allegedly may or may not be the case. It was much more that there was speeches where Putin was just saying, like, kind of don't go there.
And then I think Donald Trump is a reactive. You know, I think he reacts. He doesn't think. He just reacts. You look at his Twitter feed. You know, anything that comes out, he reacts through that. And I think, and hopefully, that he has people around him that can then sort of pull him back, advise him, whether it is the Russian influence or not. But I think it's just in his nature, particularly where he's in this seat of power, to think that my decision's the be-all and end-all. This is what I'm going to do. So he reacts to it, and 9 times out of 10 it's the wrong reaction.
What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, as I say, I think it's very difficult to guess what's actually going on with Trump a lot of the time, because it just seems so random. Like, he will do just totally random things. So yeah, it's also totally impossible to predict what will happen in that case then, because you just don't know. It's a little bit Brexity. You just don't know what's going to happen next, because it's almost as if there isn't a coherent plan. And also, I think if you are progressive, you sort of, your assumption very often is that people want to do things for the public good, but there is no sense in which Trump is connected in any way to what the public good would be for America. It's all about something that's going on in his head or behind the scenes, or amongst this sort of group of, Steve Bannon or Putin, or these are the people who are forming the policy. And I hesitate to even call it policy, because, as you say, it's just very reactive.
It's kind of, it is, in that respect, I do think it is quite fascinating that it's essentially governing by Twitter. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I never thought that Twitter would be that important. That essentially,
I don't think Twitter thought they'd be that important.
no, that, you know, it's kind of that is what he does. He does seem to govern by Twitter, which is quite an amazing thing. I mean, I think you can see the power of Twitter for getting groups together or disparate people or sort of electronic networking. If you want to know something, you know, if you're doing any research about something, you can find people on Twitter and follow them and realise that they know what you want to research about. But finding that, you know, the United States is basically governed by a madman with a phone.
Yeah.
Alleged madman, maybe not a complete madman.
And also, which is very strange, is that it looks as if a lot of people in his country like this.
Well,
that's
I know,
worrying more than Donald Trump being there, that people are supporting him to be there.
But, you know, but a lot of people in England like Boris. I mean, you know, Berlusconi was really popular for a lot of people in Italy as well. You know, it just doesn't seem.
Is it because of certainty? Do people feel that these are certain, you know, Trump is going to be consistently sort of arrogant?
I don't think that. Well, I think that's
Maybe
the only thing that is consistent
being
about
arrogant. And, you know, he's going to say the right thing. We're not going to be, I don't know, embarrassed, or we're not going to have to face some of the real issues. This is a great way. This sort of method is all about, you know, sidestepping real issues. So maybe it's that people prefer certainty to the uncertainty of actually exploring some of the difficulties in our cultures.
And do you wonder if it's also just that sort of that throwback to, it's kind of like the backlash of this, you know, there are too many uppity women and there are too many uppity non-white people, therefore let's, you know, the backlash is that's who you get in power instead.
I think as well there's a lot of people who don't want to think about complicated issues, don't want to think about politics, don't want to think about change. Change is really, really difficult, and particularly if you're talking about change of things that you know are part of your identity, whether that's religious or political or whatever. That's a really, really difficult thing. And these guys make it very easy not to have to look at that, and so they don't want to think about it. And I think actually that's going back to these people this week who are going no to yes, who you know, they didn't want to look at change, and now they realise that they really are going to have to look at either being in the EU or being in the UK, and that's a big change.
Yes, I do.
And they've got to look at that.
And that's the thing I do wonder about Britain, is we're kind of still in I mean, denial seems to be something that we do incredibly well. I had a friend from Karachi who was over about a week after Joe Cox got stabbed and was murdered, and one of the things she was saying was, she said this was a political assassination in Britain. She said, you know, we have them in Pakistan and we get really shocked when we have them and there are massive ramifications. She said it's like it's 2 weeks of mourning and then business as usual. It's like everybody's still pretending that it didn't happen. And it's like it was a political assassination, and people are still in denial that we had a political assassination over Brexit. We did. And it's a thing of we're still, I keep hearing people of we'll pull back. I remember I met somebody who is really involved in food in Northern Ireland, and he was saying, oh, you know, we're kind of at the edge, we'll pull back and it'll all be fine. And I kind of went to go, Peter, it won't. You know, it's that weird thing in Britain that we have a culture of it will be fine in the end and it won't change that much, and you're like, it's changed, it's just gone.
And I think in terms of talking about you know, people not wanting change, when you look at the age group of people who vote, because it's predominantly older people, and we know that older people don't like change, you know, there's something in that as well. So it does make it difficult to try and get people to understand the benefits of change.
And particularly big changes. You know, small changes, baby steps, that's all easy, and we do make changes and it is incremental, but all of the things that seem to be on the table at the moment are really big changes in not only out there in the political world, but that will change our identity, that will change the way we live, will change our responsibilities, and that's a really big thing for people to take on.
And do you think people in Scotland are realising that we need to, that things have changed whether we like it or not?
I think, you know what you're saying about the small steps, I think if people had understood the small things that would impact in their lives daily, their holidays, etc., there might have been a bit more, but they were thinking high level, and they were told things that, you know, it looks now as not going to be the case. But I think if we'd concentrated on just the small things that the man in the street or the woman in the street know is going to impact them. You know, your phone's going to be different when you go abroad, you're not going to have the same opportunities, you know, you're not going to share in the euros. It's just for me, I think politics is played at such a high level that people sometimes switch off because they don't think it does or will impact on them.
There's a big thing in Portugal now. They call them like ingleses desesperados, because they're used. It's British people who quite often voted to leave the EU and didn't think it would have an impact on them, and are suddenly discovering that they don't have health. They won't have health insurance, and they can't get Portuguese residency because they don't speak any Portuguese. And even people are saying, like, real estate sort of estate agents are saying they're taking somebody around a house who's British, and like, okay, but are you aware that this is going to cost you a lot more money? You're going to have to apply for all these residency forms that you wouldn't have to apply for if you were still in the EU, and it never occurred to them that they
This is kind of glorious, though, isn't it? Isn't there a certain satisfaction in that kind of comeuppance, if you like?
Not really, because I mean,
because it's us as well.
Because you think about it, I mean, in the end, Erasmus project has just been cancelled.
Yeah,
and
Erasmus is
the amount that, I mean, I went to university at Glasgow when they started doing the Erasmus project, and people were going, oh, all these middle class people can't go abroad in their gap year. Going, the really rich people can still go abroad in their gap year. The Borises, the Etonians, it's the people who are the first generation of university kids. Can the first generation of their family to go to university could go to university with a load of people from all over Europe, could then also travel because they took it up their humph to go and live in Germany for 2 years. There was no need to go. There was no reason to go apart from they felt like it. It could have totally enriches their lives. I mean, I lived in Spain for 7 years. It completely enriched my life, and I'm sure, like, you see people all over Europe. I know a lot of sort of Erasmus marriages, and people's lives are really enriched by doing that. And also, to me, it's not just the having those people in us being able to go to Europe, it's them coming here and studying here, and the impact that has on everybody at university here or college or just at work, and it's going to go.
Erasmus is a big programme within sport as well.
Is it?
Yes, it's a major programme within sport, because in terms of coach education, in terms of young players, and it is a huge worry within sport that this is not going to be available, and that was nothing that was brought in to the mix. And when people were voting, we just didn't really know what the impact was.
It's all crazy things as well, isn't it? If you have a team going to play France, are they all going to require work permits?
Yeah, stuff like that. I mean, I work in the creative industries, so I will end up going to Germany for 2 days to do an event. Are they going to need to get a work permit for me to go to Germany to speak at this thing?
Well, that's been the problem with the Edinburgh Book Festival, is they've not been able to get visas for some of their authors, and that was last year.
Yeah, but coming from outside Europe, so that is massive, and they've been really good actually. And Nick Riley, who runs the book festival, has been amazing at standing up and really calling that out and making a real effort to make people
But we're
aware.
not going to be in the same position for going to Europe.
In a way,
before we could just go, hi, I'm here.
And it's going to have a really big impact on this sort of thing, these kind of for sports people, and also within the creative industries. If you're a makeup artist or a lot of stuff behind the scenes, they will fly in those people for Gucci's fashion show. They'll fly in you in for a film thing or an event or whatever. Are they going to have? Is that additional paperwork and those additional costs just going to make it? They're just going to say, "We'll get someone from France."
And it's such a massive thing, like long term.
Yeah, so Irish passports are I think we're going to see very soon young creatives and potentially people in sports saying, I've also got an Irish passport or a dual passport of some kind. That's going to be something that, and those people are going
There's
to
a little thought just
Yeah.
planted, isn't it?
No, I have a friend who his dad was a refugee from the Second World War from Germany because he was from a Jewish family, or a very secular Jewish family, but they were Jewish, and he was saying that he was applying for a German passport, and I was that's quite a thought, and he went, I can't tell you what a thought this is that I'm applying for a German passport.
I know somebody that's doing exactly the same position doing
and
that
he talked to the German embassy, and they were like, yeah, you're absolutely welcome to a passport. You qualify under sort of the offspring of refugee status, but can you not do it yet because we're inundated? Because they've never had people in Britain applying for German passports, and all of a sudden they have.
For people who come from a refugee background, because I have on my mother's side Jewish heritage there. For people who come from a refugee background of any kind, this is absolutely terrifying. This move towards the right, you're almost like even second generation, third generation. You are predisposed to really notice these tiny changes in language, for example. So I think for anyone coming from a refugee background of any kind, this is a very, particularly distressing time. And I go down to London. I'm in London about once a month at the moment. Very often bump into people friends from, on that Jewish side, and people's first question is, where are you going to go if it goes wrong? And they've all got exit plans. Everyone's got an exit plan.
And that is, that's not the country that we knew in the early 90s. This is a country that's new from about the past 4 or 5 years. And I don't think we're equipped to understand that that's how quickly it can change. That we're not exceptional, that it can change anywhere, and it can change with us.
And people are very aware in that community, I should just say as well, that 30% of Jews in Berlin, or German Jews, survived the Holocaust because they had notice. They knew this was going to happen. They could see it coming. There's a whole load of Jews that didn't want to accept it and said, well, you read the articles that appeared in the newspapers at that time and said, Germany's never going to do what they say they're going to do. But about 30% of German Jews survived. Not the same in Poland and Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, where there was, suddenly there was this Nazi regime. So we're in a privileged position that if you want to spot what's happening, and that's not to say it will definitely go all the way.
No, but you've still got to have that suitcase and that passport.
Exactly.
Which is quite sad. We are going to move on, because that is very depressing, to something nice that has happened in the past week. Even though we lost, we could prove that the Scottish women's football team can still be as Scottish as the Scottish men's football team by snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, which was a bit rubbish, Maureen.
I think it was a big bit rubbish. It was lovely. I was out there for the first game, Scotland-England, and I also was in France in '98 for the World Cup there. So different to see all these families, all these young kids with their Scotland tops on, with the names of the female players at the back. It was wonderful. I know Shelley Kerwell, I think she's done a marvellous job with them. I know a lot of the players. I used to travel with them. I worked there for 20 years. And it was sad, it was disappointing. I listened to the criticism now, and on one hand I'm saying, well, they're critiquing the team and the manager as they would do the male, but they shouldn't really, because we haven't had the same time to get into all of this. We haven't had the same background. We don't have the same investment even now.
Now there's a video of this that I think we're going to see.
I think this is perhaps of the what is called the anthem for Scottish women in sports.
And is it do you have a starring role in this video, Maureen?
I think there's a shocking picture. Look out for it. Yes, cover your eyes.
Okay, so we're now just going to watch this video. We hope.
Well, it's by Sheridan Martin, who's a fabulous Scottish singer-songwriter, and she did it.
Fought hard for our rights through history. We've played our hand, the great woman of this land. Heroism we have seen, Mary Barber's reign, our maid Jane Haining, righteous among nations. We are doctors, lawyers, mothers, footballers, first minister, poet laureate. We're on the move, and I'm telling you, the glass ceiling's going, we're coming through. Rise up, take the stage, play your game, don't be afraid. You're a work of art, or Jones of art, always be proud of who you are. Girl, you gotta hold your head up high, don't let this moment pass you by. You can be anything you believe you can be, girl. This world is waiting just for you, so go and shine and live the truth. You can be anything you believe you can be. So let's boldly build new roads, sports stars and role models. 3 silvers made Olympic gold, Catherine's legacy we'll follow. It's up to all of us, stand up for what we love. Feminism is an energy of heart and soul, humility. So husbands, fathers, sons and brothers united, we'll fight for each other. No country is more fitting to inspire the world we live in.
That's great. Obviously one created, the pictures have been created specifically for the World Cup. But the song itself, I think, has got real empowerment in it.
But I mean, this, it's like this is the year that all of a sudden everybody's realised that we have a Scottish women's football team and
women can play sport.
And the women are allowed to play sport. I do also think it is probably to do with the fact that a lot of male football fans are absolutely desperate to see Scotland do something in an international and realise the men are not going to do it, so they need to support the women. But I mean, this is not something that's just happened all of a sudden. This is not just an overnight success. There's obviously been a lot of investment and work in this. I mean, how long were you working in?
I was there for 20 years.
And how did it start? What happened?
Well, I was the first person to be employed by Scottish Women's Football. They had realised that at that point there was a sort of bit of an interest. So 20 years working in that sport, looking at that point when I started, I was responsible for every part of it. The internationals, I appointed the manager, the development, etc., etc. And as time went on, saying to the Scottish Football Association, Sport Scotland, these are areas perhaps that you should take responsibility for. So it was a gradual process.
And how did that work? What was the reaction to women playing football?
I've had sort of strange reactions all through the time that I've been there. The powers that be have got to always tick the box and pay lip service whether they believe in it or not. But there is a change. There's a change going throughout globally in terms of women in sport. I think social media has helped, because in terms of the written media, you still don't see that much difference.
And why do you think that is?
Well, it's dominated by men. I don't really think it needs much more explanation. I think we've got one female sports editor in the UK. We now have Anna Kessel down in the Telegraph, who is a sports editor. So I think the decision makers do not look upon women in sport as anything particularly great. They'll look at the large tournaments, the large successes, but on a regular basis, if you pick up a paper and they've got 12 to 15 pages of sport, it will be, let's hunt the part about women in sport. Yeah, it's still the same.
It was a great documentary, wasn't there? The other, Margot McCook made a documentary about Rose
Riley, and I watched it. And I'm not huge on sport or anything, but I was like, "Go Rose!" She was amazing.
An amazing
character.
Inspiring. And again, Elsie Cook was part of that. And I think just 2 nights ago they were actually recognised. I got an award for inspiring team in the 1972. But Rose has got a great story as a young girl wanting to play football. Going through the stages and ages, pretending she was a boy, getting a short back and sides. But not being accepted in Scotland, went out to Italy, where they absolutely loved her. She got Italian citizen, played in the World Cup, scored the goal, and
Did she play for AC Milan?
She played for AC Milan, she played in France, and it's a great story. It's just been told now. That's 30, 40 years ago.
Which is crazy, because this was going on as I was growing up, and I think it would have had an impact on the sporty girls around me.
Even just from having a look at your book, Where Are the Women? It's just, it really, I was thinking, if I had known who these women were when I was growing up, my life here would have been, I was very aware growing up in the 80s that there was no place for me in Scotland. Like, nobody was interested in me, and nobody was interested in women, and no one would have been interested in anything that I had to contribute to the country. So I had no.
So you would have thought you were the first.
Well, I just would thought I was getting out of here as fast as I could go. From with using my freedom of movement passport that will now be taken away from me soon. And I really interesting, even looking through the women that you were in your book. But even you have to it's like you have to dig and pick these things up, and they were there. I mean, what did you find out particularly about the sporting women that you wrote about in the book?
I'm sorry, there's over 1,200 women in the book, so remembering the name. But we were talking earlier about a golfer who had won the Curtis Cup, female golfer, Scottish golfer.
And what's the Curtis Cup?
It's a big.
I think it was a forerunner to the Solheim, wasn't it?
Yes.
So it's a European Cup where golfers play. The Solheim Cup's in Gleneagles in September this year, so it's Team Europe and Team America.
It's America. So this is a time where you can't fly to America at the time she's going. She goes over on a boat. It takes her like a month to get to America or whatever it is to get to get there. She wasn't allowed to attend the dinner because they didn't have women in the golf club. And this continued. They have a dinner every year for the winners and past winners of the Curtis Cup, and the first time this woman was able to attend was in Scotland, actually, when it's being held in Scotland, I think in like 2008, something like that. So she's a very elderly woman now who is a participant, a winner in this cup, and it's the first time she's been able to attend the winners' dinner. Like, mind-blowing. So, and I'd never heard of her. You know, that's the other thing, just as I hadn't heard of Rose Riley, and I'm interested, you know, we're all interested. So
I think because Danny Garavalli wrote an article about the women's football quite a couple of months ago, and one of the things I think she was talking about it was how there is that thing of women don't play football yet because they weren't allowed. It was as soon as kind of football started to become important, women got banned from playing football. You know, and it's the same way with women in swimming. As a friend of mine, Jenny Landreth, wrote a book. It was like a history of women swimming, and when swimming started to become a kind of acceptable occupation for your leisure, women were not allowed to go swimming because it was seen as unfeminine.
And we've gold medalists in swimming with Nancy Reich and various other swimmers who were Olympic gold medalists in the early 20th century.
We had a World Cup, we had a world winner last week in Paisley, Hannah Rankin, who's a boxer. She won this IBO super welterweight. And, you know, it's not been that long that women have been allowed to box. And Hannah came straight into to boxing as a professional. And it's to hear, you know, the story behind this. But now she's there, she's World Cup. World Cup's on the brain. She's now a world champion. But I don't know how many people know about this. You know, it is still this secrecy behind it. But we have lots of success. We've got a netball team going down to the World Cup in Liverpool. Last year, believe it or not, we had a world champion female tug-of-war team.
Really?
I didn't even know we had a tug-of-war team. But these girls, again, raised their own money. They went out to South Africa, training in the gym. And who did they bump into but the Warriors? You know, so it's a small world. But these girls have to work hard. And we have quite a lot of success. But Dr. Fiona Skillen, who is with Glasgow Caledonian University, when we worked in our Pioneers of Sport event last year, her quote along the lines of, "You will know many, many men in the history of sport. You don't know many women." That doesn't mean to say there weren't any. It's just that you haven't heard about them.
But the impact of that is massive. You know, if you have to be the first, if every woman in every generation, whatever it is, actually has to be the first to be a, whatever it is, whether it's to be a tax collector, whether it's to be a published writer, whether it's to be a professional footballer, then, you know, that's a much bigger leap. If you know it can be done, it's been done by somebody that you can identify with.
It's even before that. It would never occur to you something you could do because it's not what you do. I do think you can't. There is a big element of you can't be what you can't see. So if you don't think there's a professional footballing team for you, you're not going to play football. You're going to give it up much earlier because it's not, or even if it's not, if there's not a kind of the way, you know, that you have men's of amateur leagues. If there's not a big amateur league and you're good at football and you like football, but it's not going to be something you want as a career, there's nowhere for you to go, so you would just stop really quickly. I mean, I think it's amazing to see. I find it, especially with women in middle age, obviously not with sport, but with other things, they discover they're good at things that never occurred to them they could do, and no one has ever valued them.
But I think they're doing that in sport as well. Hannah Burdell recently started up a football team down in Westminster.
Right.
And she's noted to say, and in fact I just heard her say it again, and I bumped into Hannah in Nice. They're supporting the team, which was great to see. One of her teammates, a Labour MP, had never played football at school, put on her boots for the first time and absolutely loved it. So there are older women coming into sports. You know, you've got things like walking football, bounce back to netball. So there's lots of areas now. It's just getting this message out.
And do you think it's the fact that I mean, Scotland doesn't have a huge media, but part of the problem is that it's sports media, especially in the 1970s, so they're not interested in anything that isn't men and isn't male football.
Exactly.
I mean, you know,
there's not much I can answer to that.
Yes.
You know, there was an article a few months ago by some guy, you know, whose name I can't remember, writing about, you know, the McCarthyite genderism of that we've got to support women's football, and you're kind of going, son, can you just go back to 1976 where you belong and just stay there? Like, just don't
watch it. You know, it's okay. Switch off.
I don't watch women's football. I don't. I'm really glad that it's going on, and really happy to sort of support it. But it's not. I don't watch sport. It's not something.
But it's about having the opportunity to watch it if you want to watch it.
It should be there, and it's not. Yeah. It's not a McCarthyism. It's like not causing anybody harm. It's just.
Well, of course it's not. It's doing the opposite, isn't it? It's empowering young women. It's keeping them fit, healthy. It's helping their mental health. It's just. It's so many things wrapped up into one.
It is completely. Yeah. Well, that's about all we have time for, because that is now 1 o'clock, and I'd just like to say thank you so much to Maureen and Sara. And I've got to read something now. I've got to read a plug for us. 1 second. So I have to tell you that producing programmes is expensive, and to allow us to continue, to allow us to continue to make programmes and pay the bills to run our studio, we need more people to sign up as Broadcasting Scotland supporters, and your £5 a month will help us to continue. And please sign up on our website, which is broadcastingscotland.scot/register. And so please do sign up if you would like to see more programmes done by Broadcasting Scotland. And thank you very much for watching. And thanks very much to Sara and Maureen.
Thank you.